Hi, it's Marc Summers, and today we're going to be discussing some cool things with Marc McEwen. We discuss being prepared to fail before you can be successful.
You can't give up. You have to keep going forward.
The impact of extreme health experiences like a stroke.
Mark, when I had my stroke, I could have just turned around and walked away. But no, I kept at it. I thought it would be shorter, like a cold or the flu. No.
And great advice from Mark's mom about being nice. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Marc Summers Unwraps. It was hard when Double Dare became Family Double Dare because the prizes were trips to Europe and cars. And if the kids would screw up, the parents sometimes would literally grab the kids by the neck backstage, and we'd have to separate them. You know, I can't believe you didn't get that flag, and we didn't get that trip. And it's like it's a game show, and the kids don't care about the prizes; they just want to get messy and have fun. But the parents would screw it up by taking it so seriously. And so, yeah, we had situations where a parent went through one of the obstacles and his pants came down, and it was live, and I didn't know whether we should keep going or not, but we did. And I remember we rolled the credits on his underwear on his rear end. So those are kind of the fun things that happen. We did a show with Weird Al Yankovic against Lou Ferrigno when we were doing Celebrity Double Dare on Fox, and Weird Al answered every question we wrote. And it's like, you want to go to a physical challenge. That's why kids and parents watch this show. But no matter what the question was, how obscure it was, or almost guaranteed to go to a physical challenge questions were, Al knew the answer. So we were like 10, 12 questions deep and hadn't gone to a physical challenge. And I said to him, man, Weird Al, how do you know all the answers to these weird questions? And he said, hey, man, that's my gig. And yeah, what do you say to that, Maybe it wasn't very entertaining. And what we did after we went to the commercial break, we came up with like the most ridiculous questions, knowing that it had to go to physical challenge because nobody in the right mind would know any of these, and it worked. But, you kind of have to go with the moment and, laugh with them and hopefully be entertained by what's happening, because you really can't go, hey, we're going to stop tape and fix that. It's not as good as the live moment. So we always kept the live moment in, All right, everybody. Marc Summers here. Today we're unwrapping a very talented man, a man who I'm actually very envious of because he did so many things that I wanted to do. And he got these opportunities. Marc McEwen is with us. Marc, how are you?
I'm fine, and they are lucky they have you.
You are a sweet man. Our careers compare on a parallel in such an interesting way. And I want to talk about something that you did, I guess it was in the mid-'90s, a show that I just loved, and you got to interact with all these people that I just wanted to hang out with. The show was called Live by Request. What do you remember about that program?
Well, I remember, Mark, Tony Bennett got me that job. I met Tony, first interviewed him at the Eyes, Windows on the World. And he said, I reminded him of Ed Sullivan. Come on now.
Come on, really?
People would call in and say, I met my wife to this song, could you sing it? And he'd sing it. So they brought that to A&E. And they wanted, because it was going to be on Valentine's Day of 1995, they wanted a woman, Tony, and a woman, blah, blah, blah. And Tony said, no, Marc McEwen. And they said, who? 3 times they came to him and tried to get someone else. And 3 times he said my name. And finally he put his foot down, and in I walked. They all looked at me. They had no idea who I was.
That's fantastic. What a great story. That's a fantastic story. So how did you meet him?
Tony, Tony Bennett, come on, we all knew the name Tony Bennett.
Yeah.
Like Sinatra, Tony Bennett, Ella, all those guys. So he was sitting there, and Tony wasn't the guy he ended up being. Record of the Year, and his son, Danny, he said, I can sing, Tony said, but I can't manage. I need someone to manage me. Danny said, I'll do it. So don't change a thing. So they went on a college concert tour, and all the kids heard "I left my heart," all that stuff. They went nuts, and Tony didn't change anything, and went on to Grammys and all that.
And who were some of the other artists that you did that show with?
Oh God, Elton John, Earth, Wind and Fire, Vince Gill, Tony 3 times.
You know, when you're sitting there with your idols, it's hard to sort of function.
David Bowie, he did the show, and Bowie's my boy. So David, right before the show began, he and his band were in a circle like they do before NFL games and all that.
Right.
He looked up at me and he winked.
Oh my!
David Bowie just winked at me. Very cool.
There are moments that you don't forget like that. I was backstage at the time I was being handled by William Morris. That was a long time ago. And I was backstage in Philadelphia, and the Rolling Stones were going on. And Mick Jagger was backstage warming up, running back and forth. And he caught my eye, but what do you say to Mick Jagger? I left him alone. But they had me right in the front row, like, 6, arm lengths away from him. And at one point after the intermission, he goes away for a while, and some other big name comes out and plays for a half hour so Mick can rest. And then he came back out afterwards, and he did one of these. He looked at me, he went, like, what the hell am I even doing here at this point in my age? And I never forgot about that frickin', Mick Jagger was sort of interacting with me for that minute. You just don't ever think those moments are going to happen. You had an interesting background. Your dad was in the service, right, in the military?
Air Force, colonel in the Air Force. I've lived in Berlin, Fort Meade, Maryland, Montgomery, Alabama, all over the place. Which Mark helped me in that I was used to moving every 3 years. When I was a DJ and went to Detroit, people in Detroit only wanted to live and be in Detroit. I just kept going, rooting for players as opposed to teams, because I didn't live in a place long enough to be a Met fan or an Indian fan or a Brown fan. So players, players for me.
Where did this passion for the arts and entertainment begin with you?
It began with a guy whose name is in a bad way these days. And the guy is Bill Cosby. See, now on Def Jam and HBO, they cuss up a storm. But then you only had the Tonight Show, Johnny Carson, and you had to be clean to be on that show. So when I did stand-up, and Mark always say I was so funny doing stand-up, I ended up in news. My whole act was clean because of him. And so that led me down that path, and rock and roll radio came as I went into college. I always liked radio, but I never thought I'd be on the radio.
I grew up in Indiana. I know you were in Maryland for a good part of your life as well. And I started as a disc jockey at a station called WBMP in Elwood, Indiana. I did weekends from 6 to 11. I was 15 years old. And when I left, some guy named Dave Letterman took my place, believe it or not, because I lost my ride going up to Elwood because it was like 45 minutes up the road and I couldn't drive. So Dave took my place. And then I started doing magic, and from magic I started doing stand-up comedy. And you have such a similar background. What do you think that is with guys like us who, is it that we don't have any talent and we don't know what the hell to do, so we'll do anything to get in? Or how does this happen is my question.
Well, Mark, what I learned, and I bet you learned too, you can't give up. You have to keep going forward. There are people who, and we are in a crowded field. Good to know, but there are people who try one thing, it turns out the way they didn't expect, and they never do it again. You have to be prepared to fail before you are successful. So you mentioned Letterman. When I was on the radio in Detroit, I left Detroit to go to Chicago. And the guy who took my place was a young DJ out of Hartford, Connecticut. His name, Howard Stern.
Oh, my God, really?
Yeah.
That's unbelievable. That is, these stories are unbelievable. So who gave you that never give up attitude? Was it your father? Was it your mom? Where did you get that? Or do you think you were born with that?
No, my mom and dad put no give up in this dog. And Mark, when I had my stroke, I could have just turned around and walked away. But no, I kept at it. I thought it would be shorter, like a cold or the flu. No, but they put that in me. They gave that in me. And they taught me manners, please and thank you. Yes, ma'am, no, sir. If you said to my mom, get me that, she would cross her arms and look at you.
Yeah, that ain't happening, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So you brought up the stroke, and let's talk about that. We'll kind of do this backwards in that I want to talk a little bit more about your career, but the fact that, tell this experience. When I got online and I heard how this happened, you're lucky to be alive, my friend. Tell this story.
Mark, I always say you rarely hear stroke and lucky in the same sentence. Mark, I was in Maryland, and I didn't feel quite right at the airport. I went through security, and my wife, I called up, I said, I don't feel so good. She said, eat something. It might be that. I bought a slice of pizza, didn't eat it. That's when you knew something was wrong. Yeah. And went in an ambulance to a hospital, and the doctor at the hospital I was on the bed, he was back Googling me.
What?
What is a good word? What? And so he misdiagnosed me to having the stomach flu as opposed to having a stroke.
Oh, my.
So I go home where I was staying, and I got on a plane 2 days later, had my massive stroke. And the SkyCap, I had a wheelchair at the airport, wheeled me through the airport, and left me curbside by myself. I was dying. And a guy in baggage claim was heavy, smoking a cigarette, came out to smoke a cigarette, and he looked at me and said, do you want me to take that phone? I had gotten my wife. And she said, hand the phone to someone who can dial 911. So I handed it to him. He called the ambulance. Mark, he went back into baggage claim. If he walked in right now, I wouldn't know who he was.
Really?
Right. He saved my life. He's the reason I believe in angels. And so off I went. And in the ambulance, I'm joking, chatting, and got there, and it was a mess and a coma. When you wake up from a coma and you see your dad, your wife, your sister, your brother, your best friend, your cousin all around the bed, you think, this ain't good.
How long were you in the coma?
4 days, intensive care for a week, hospital for a month.
How old were you when this happened?
51.
Very young. Did you have a stroke background in your family?
No, but everyone I knew in news had high blood pressure.
Yes.
It got me. Now I've lost 50 pounds. I exercise a lot. I'm vegan. You know, I always say you have armor around your body when you're young. That armor gets thinner and thinner as you get older. You have to help that armor help you. And that's where all this comes into play.
Isn't high blood pressure predominant in the black community?
It is. Yes, it is. You know, I live in the quote-unquote stroke belt. Black people in this belt eat fried foods, don't exercise, the guys don't go to the doctor. All that works against you. And so, Mark, my job is to let people know you have to pay attention to all that stuff.
So you said you're a vegan. That's something I don't think I could ever do unless, I guess, put in a corner, you kind of are forced to do it. What is that vegan life like, my friend? I'm not sure that it's very appealing to me, but can you make that stuff taste good?
Well, here's the thing. My wife, who I love dearly, who I met when she was 16, saw a documentary on how bad meat was for you. And she came in and said, guess what? I'm not eating that anymore. Mark, you know, if you're married, you tend to go along with your spouse if you want.
47 years, my friend. 47 years.
No, so it took a while, but occasionally I'll have nachos with ground beef, but I never was a steak guy, never was. But they made vegan ground beef and all that. They made it so good you can't tell it's not regular ground beef.
Well, I'll believe you. I'll believe you on this stuff. The few things I've tried, what's it pronounced? Seitan, or it sounds like Satan. I've tried that stuff. It doesn't work for me. I got to tell you, it doesn't work. So your first big national job was on the CBS Morning Show, correct?
Yes.
And how did you get that job?
Okay, Mark, that was my first TV job. I never had been fired in radio before. I got fired twice in New York. And then at APP, then at NEW. And when I got fired from NEW, it's on the wall. The Daily News did a piece on me, on us. What do you want to do next? Full page story. And I said, I might try television. Truth was, Howard Stern was across town doing the mornings. I wanted to do afternoon drive to his mornings. Didn't say that.
Ah, of course.
The guy who was my executive producer, Bob Shanks, was in his robe that Sunday, reading the paper, turned to his wife and said, I think I found my weatherman. I thought,
but you had never done weather, right?
Nope. So they called me up, and Pete Bonventry said, I'm one of the producers for this show. And I thought it was CBS FM, an oldies radio station. So hold on. Mark, if a morning show in radio has one producer, that's a big deal.
Yes.
Many producers. And then he says, we're going up against GMA and the Today Show. I say, hold on. Is this TV? He says, yes. Interested? Yeah. Yes, I am. So I go to Black Rock. I'm sitting in the office with with Bob Shanks. The phone is blowing up. He's paying no attention to it. He's talking to me. Are you a Yankee fan or a Met fan? How long have you lived in New York? Do you have brothers and sisters? I thought, what are you doing? He was sizing up, asking me questions. He said, have you ever been on TV before? I've been on one time. HBO used to have a free weekend where everything was free to get people to buy HBO. So I had one tape. He said, did you bring it with you? I said, it's out by the secretary. Did you go get it? So he's watching it, and he says to me, this is the first time you've been on TV? I said, yeah. He says, how do you feel about doing the weather? We'll get you meteorologists, and we'll have one audition. And do me a favor, when you leave here, don't tell anyone about this meeting. I said, okay, Mark, I went downstairs. I told everybody. So I had one audition. In a studio, there were a bunch of people, one camera. He stood next to it. And Bob Saget, who I just passed away, I knew Bob. Bob and I worked together. I met Bob on a show called Comedy Tonight. As I walked in, I say, hey, Bob. He says, I think you got this. There's one other guy in you, and the guy's from Boston. He's older. Okay, so Bob says to me, Bob Shanks, when I get in, is there something that can lead you into your comedy? I said, ask me where I went on vacation recently. He says, okay. So he says, make sure you talk to the camera. I'll be right next to him. So he asked me questions. And then he says, where'd you go on vacation recently? And I say, Jamaica. You know, everyone in Jamaica has an accent. Where are you from, Mom? Where are you going, Mom? What's your name, Mom? I said, even the dogs, bark, bark, Mom. Mark, if you say something funny in a room full of comedians, they go, oh, that's funny. But if you say something funny in a room full of newsmen, they fall right on the floor. So that's how I got the job.
And how did you prepare for that weather forecast since you really had never done it before?
Well, as I like to say, Mark, I don't know nothing.
Really?
One of my dear friends every day and tell me it's going to be raining in the Rockies, out west it's going to be dry, might be wet on the East Coast. So I would just repeat. And at first I had a map behind me, and then it was a full screen map, and I would just talk. So that's how I did it. Then I said I used to do DJ. We interviewed everyone. I covered the Oscars and the Grammys and the Golden Globes and the Country Music Awards and on and on.
You did the Olympics a couple times as well, right?
Yep. Albertville, the Winter Olympics, Albertville in France, Lillehammer in Norway, and Nagano in Japan. And in Japan, I ran with the Olympic torch.
Oh, my God. So let's talk about your life today. The rehab was absolute hell. I was watching you go through this on some video. You had to start all over. Explain what this process was all about.
Well, Mark, even now, if I get tired, my voice, I have to really pay attention, falls apart. I'm right-handed. My stroke affected my dominant side. I do everything left-handed. I write left-handed. I eat left-handed. Contacts left-handed. Everything. And people say I couldn't do that. And I say you could if you had to. And one day I was trying to write. It was all squiggly, and I thought, heck with this. I'm going to do it left-handed. So now, Mark, if you see me, you have no idea. But the thing is, I know. I think everyone knows. But I found out you want the life to stop because you have. It doesn't work that way. But what I learned was you think you're the only one who's had something like this. Mark, across the street, they have something. Next door neighbor, they have something. People you meet, everyone has something. And so, that world is full of people. So you try to help them, don't give up, and all that. And off you go.
How long did it take you to get back to what you thought was normal?
I don't know if I'm still there. It took me maybe 5 years after the stroke to get back on local TV. And, I did that for a while. It was called Positive Mark. I had a show. Then that ended, and I did 2 years with the Black News Channel. And Mark, the way this happened, my mom always said, be sweet, be nice. And I always tried to be nice to anyone. People think if you are in the limelight, no, don't talk to me. Talk to them. And you have a fan for life. Okay, so I had lunch with a guy named Gary Wardlaw and his wife. He was the VP of news. And so he used to be the general manager of our CBS station in Syracuse. He had a lake that was polluted. He put a bunch of fish in there. If you got the right fish, you won $1 million. So I go there. He never forgot that. He said, you were so nice to me, and blah, blah, blah. I was thinking, really? So he says, how about Men's Health? I said, well, because of where I come from, the first thing they say is health. But I say, how about just health? I can get you whooped. He said, no, Men's Health. I said, okay. Because, as I said earlier, you don't say no. You don't say no. So he calls me a month later, and he says, my wife says, if I don't offer you a job, she's going to kill me. It changed from Men's Health to All Things Men, cooking, health, being a lawyer and all that. We need a title. I said, how about All Things Men? So I used to have to drive up to Tallahassee, 3.5 hours one night.
My.
And then the pandemic hit. And they said Zoom. I vaguely heard of Zoom, but I didn't know what it was. So all of, not last year, but 2020 was all remote Zoom. And then last year, my producer is here. He's also a stroke survivor, Kenny Lewis. And he comes to the house, he has a camera, he does the whole thing. He edits, he produces, and everything you see, he put together. So,
oh, that's fantastic. Makes your life easier.
It sure does, sure does. And Mark, at first I was like, put this here, put that there, and now I thought, he's really good. So I give it to him. I say, yeah, this, maybe that, but otherwise, do what you want. Okay, I'm very happy.
You know, at this point in our lives, Mr. McEwen, we don't need to be thinking about that stuff. Just hand it off to somebody else, you know? I'm at that point in my life as well, you know?
Yeah.
Let's talk about something that you probably couldn't prepare for, and that is the financial aspect of this. Here you are working, you get this stroke. Did you have insurance? Did the station pay for it? What did it do to your mental, your psychological, your family life, your kids? What's that experience like?
Well, Mark, if I had known how bad it was, I would have been more concerned. I didn't know. My wife said when I filled out the W-2 form, put the maximum for health insurance. But our check will be small. Put the maximum just in case. That saved my life. And
really?
Yeah. I had money in 401ks. I saved up, had all kinds. All that went away. And learned the hard way that if you hit the 401ks before you retire, the tax burden is 40%.
So how did you handle that?
One foot in front of the other. You make it up as you go along. I'm not going to lie to you, Mark. The last 5-10 years have been awful, just awful. It's been juggling bills and just awful.
When we get these illnesses, I'm on this crazy medication for my cancer. The pills cost about $13,000 a month. And I was on a grant, yeah. And I was on a grant that just disappeared, yes. And I've been scrambling for the last couple of months trying to get this covered because, believe it or not, I don't have an extra $13,000 a month, okay? I don't know many people that do unless you're Steven Spielberg or, George Clooney. And the one thing they tell you in situations like yours and mine is not to stress. Well, for the love of God, what are you supposed to do? And you make as many plans as you can, but nobody's going to predict to me that you're going to have medication that's going to cost, this insane amount. And so, we think we have it resolved now, but I have a guy I'm a computer guy, and I know how to push buttons and get to people. But for those people who are on this medication who don't know how to use the system, what do they do? And you're telling me, you're being very open, and I admire and appreciate that the last 5 years have been tough. And when we see what's going on with the world right now with inflation, they said today on the CBS Morning News, which I still watch because I started watching you and I'm still hooked, that the average bill monthly for homes is $225 a month more than it was last year at this time. Where's that money coming from? How do people deal with that? And it's not just one or two people. It's, they say, 70 or 80% of the country. The world's a mess right now. What advice can you give anybody for that?
Oh, gosh. Mark, when you say the world is a mess right now, you're right. I tell my twins, I've never seen this before. We didn't grow up with this. We had things, not this. And as my son called it, the pandemic. I said, what? The pandemic. He'd only read it. He hadn't heard it. Boosters and masks and money and blah, blah, blah. It's a mess. It's a mess.
Yeah, it's a mess.
Advice would be, it's a mess for all of us. Don't give up. Don't give up.
Tell me what your kids are doing these days.
My twins are seniors in high school. One of them has a YouTube channel with 5,000 subscribers. Mark,
Oh my gosh! So what's the website so we can push that?
it's Brony Boy, BRONYBOY. One word, Brony Boy 5463. And what he does anime videos. He writes all the scripts and all that. But Mark, when he had 5,000 subscribers, I said, let Dad tell you what you should. I said, don't change a thing. Do exactly what you do.
Yeah.
But all that is him. And Mark, it's so great to go out to dinner and have your son go, I got this. I got this.
Oh my, he's doing that well, huh?
Maya is 26. She's out in L.A. She works now for a real estate firm, rental, big one.
Sounds like you've done well there. I'm going to probably, I'm going to guesstimate here that the real person in charge who you probably owe a lot to is your wife. Tell me about her.
Well, my wife, Mark, is my sister's best friend. She met her at driver's ed when they were 16. And she's,
Oh my.
when I get my license, I want to drive you over to meet my new friend. I said, okay. She pulled up. I thought, who is this? We both got married before. We both had a daughter. And together we have sons. Yours, mine, and ours.
Oh, nice.
Mark, I still can't believe I'm married to her.
How many years has it been?
It'll be 20 in April. I've known her for 46 years.
Oh my. And what's the magic to this relationship, Mark?
Well, I interviewed Val Demings, Jerry Demings, the mayor of Orange County here. He's married to Congressman Val Demings. And I said, what's the secret to a good marriage? And I said, all the married men are leaning forward right now. They want to hear it. He laughed. He said, you learn you don't have to be right all the time. You have to pick and choose your battles. And sometimes they'll say things that you think, and you keep your mouth shut. But the thing is to make help the relationship last. So fights and blah, blah, blah.
That's that old thing, happy wife, happy life. I guess there's more truth to that than we could even say, And Val Demings, wasn't she the chief of police down there, for heaven's sakes?
Yeah. And Jerry was also the chief of police. He hired her. And I asked...
Oh, my.
I heard she rides motorcycles. Do you? Oh, yeah. We have two of them now. She's in D.C., so I ride them myself and all that. He was great. Great guy.
That's amazing. So you're positive, you're energetic. Are you, now that COVID is hopefully on its way out, are you going to go back and give lectures to various groups and try and promote this positivity?
Well, I'm going to Columbus, Ohio in May for a speech. I'm the keynote speaker for the Neuroscience Forum. Okay. But before I get to all that, let me tell them about you. You were reality TV before there was reality TV. The heroes to guys like me because you were on TV. And I sat there and watched the whole thing with Slime. Maya says, oh, I remember Slime. They would drop it down. Maya had to be 4 or 5,
yeah,
maybe?
Probably.
But yeah, Mark, you were the guy before the guy was the guy.
Well, that's very kind. The weirdest thing, this past weekend, I was home Saturday night. And again, I'm not name dropping here again, but Bobby Flay's a good friend via my Food Network connections. And he texted me and he said, dude, they're doing you on Saturday Night Live. And I turned over and son of a gun, Alex Moffat was doing an impression of me on Saturday Night Live. And I thought, well, this is the strangest thing I've ever seen in my entire life, So you just don't even know the impact that you have on people's lives when you're doing television. And I've been lucky. I've been doing this 40 plus years. two shows stand out in people's minds: Double Dare and Unwrapped. And when we were doing Unwrapped on Food Network, there would be no Food Network without Emerald. But believe it or not, Unwrapped was beating Emerald back in the day. And so it was interesting to have two different lives. One where the kids grew up watching me, and then they were nice enough to follow me over when I went to Food Network. So the impact that we have. And so here's the whole thing. We've got to pay it forward. And the way we do that is by taking whatever knowledge we have, whether, I lecture at colleges, I try to help the Leukemia Society and folks like that. You're helping the people with strokes. The information and the lives that we have been lucky enough to live, whether there's ups and downs, and everybody's got ups and downs, and you pointed that out. There's a Yiddish proverb where they said if you put all your worries on a clothesline, you would always go back to your own, because when you see the other people's worries on their clothesline, it's always going to be worse than yours. And we've got to be able to take our experiences and our lives and try to help people. And you're doing that, and I applaud you, and I appreciate that, sir, very much.
I'll tell you, when I go to speak and I'm brought by someone, and up front are the survivors in wheelchairs with their arms crooked and the droop of their mouth, I say to them, I'll be right back. I go over. Mark, it's like coming home. It's hugging and all that. When I talk about strokes, I'm not talking about one that my dad had, or a coworker, or a neighbor had. I'm talking about me. So when they talk about rehab, I'll say, what kind of rehab? And then I can tell them my rehab. And when you have someone who has gone through or is going through what you are going through, you're all ears, because they know. And so I try to give them hope, inspiration, all that.
People always say to me, what's the most important thing you've done? And I always say, I was on a television show that I was hosting on Lifetime called Biggers and Summers, and I came out and talked about having obsessive-compulsive disorder. Well, the next thing I know, I'm on Howard Stern, I'm on Oprah, I'm on the Today Show, I'm everywhere. And then I wrote a book called Everything in Its Place. And today, even to this day, that book was written in 1999. When people come up to me and say, I didn't know what I had until I saw you on Oprah, until I read your book, until I saw you on the Today Show, and you changed my life, there's no better feeling. Forget about the slime, forget about Unwrapped, forget about all that stuff. If you're able to change a person's life by giving your speeches, writing a book, whatever it is, that's the most important thing that you and I can do. And we got to just keep on doing it.
Mark, I tip my cap to you.
And to you as well, sir. Marc Summers Unwraps is a production of Believe Limited, created by me, Marc Summers, and Jessica Richmond. Produced by Keith Corneluk and Jessica Richmond. Executive produced by Patrick James Lynch and Ryan Geelan. Post-production support from Joshua Sterling Bragg and Believe Limited. Don't forget to subscribe or follow the show on your favorite podcast player, and if you really love it, why don't you leave us a rating and a review? Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Marc Summers Unwraps.